next talk is about social network analysis. So, like this morning, we will start with the background before giving some example. And at the end of my talk, I will develop one study we conduct in our team, in our laboratory. So let's start with definition. So a social network is a social structure of people related directly or indirectly to each other through a common relation of interests. So this is the definition of social network. So what is a social network analysis? And social network analysis is a study of social network to understand their structure and behavior. So we have two levels of definition. The origins of social network analysis is not computer science, it's not mathematics, but it's humanities and especially sociology and typically sociometry from 1920 and 1950s. The base of the idea is that small group structures can influence individual perception of action and action choices. So these studies are focused on small number of population, but also on global structure pattern of social network. We call this approach sociocentric. The opposite is egocentric. So we just consider globally the social network. So in these studies, social network is represented by a graph. We call this graph a sociogram. So the graph is made by node and links. Node represent individuals and links are social relationships. So what is our social relationship? It's dependent on your application. It could be friendship, professional, familial, trust. The graph could be, this relation could be oriented. So if I trust you, it's not mandatory that you trust me in the same way. Could be wait, I trust you more than you. So we can explain this kind of information. It can be sometimes specific graph, like hierarchical graph that called tree. So when we represent the social relationship with a graph, so we rely on mathematical graph theory. So we can use all the material, all the formalism used in graph theory to study the social network. There are also studies in computer science, which is called graph mining. So we can use all of this material too. So let's give an example that could be taken again at the end of my talk. So here is a social network where you have people, A, B, C, D, Alice, Bob, Caroline, Diana, Eric, and Fred, and you have relationship. So if it's Facebook, that could be his friend of this relation. So this is a very useful representation for social network. So what is the relation with data mining? So in data mining, we have a lot of individuals. It's not small amount of individuals. So social relationships are digital footprint collected from online services. We talk about knowledge-based network analysis. Knowledge discovery is based on entities associated with actors on the social network. This involves the quantification of interaction between individuals and groups. So let's take an example. This is an anecdotic example. This is a very well-known example which is called Small World. In 1929, a writer named Carinti wrote a short novel in which he postulated that with the development of communication, individuals would come closer and closer to the point that there would be only 6 degrees of separation between two people chosen at random. So what is 6 degrees of separation? 6 degrees of separation means that there is a maximum of 6 intermediate to be able to establish the link of knowledge between two random people. This is just a novel, but during many years this became a scientific hypothesis. So, and some psychologists and sociologists consider it as a challenge to check, to verify if it's correct or it's not correct. So there are many studies, but the one which is well known is in 1967, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram reconduct this experiment. So how does he proceed? The experiment consists on asking to a random people to send a letter to another one. So there are 2 random people. If he don't know the targeted person, he had to forward the letter to some well-known friend or family and ask them to do the same thing again and again. So the result is shown here. So the start is in Kansas, who sent in Iowa, then and the last one is in New York. So the study is conducted with American people, and the average pass length is about 5 and 6. So it's more closer than 5 than 6. So the hypothesis of 6 intermediate is a real hypothesis. So for this experiment, there is no computer, there is no data, so very small population. So there are, in this basis, there are many other experiments have been carried out with, for example, email, with Twitter, and all the social media, all non-social media, have experimented this what we call the Milgram experiment. So the difference is the most massive experiment is done by Facebook because they have many data. So this is the result of Facebook experiment. They in 2008 they make the experiment with 6 million users. So it's a very huge amount of users. So the result in the first experiment was it's difficult to read here, is 5.28. So they renew the experiment in 2011, and the result is 4.74. Sorry, and in 2016 the result was 5.57. So the world is very small, and the world is shrinking. So we can show this kind of hypothesis by the social network, and especially social media network. So we talk about social media analysis. Let's take another example. I have chosen this example. Sorry. For obvious reason, of the center of interest of the liars. So you work on healthcare. So I have chosen this sample. This sample is in the largest category of how to influence, how to modelize the influence of propagation. So there is one of model of this category called epidemic model. So it's a very interesting model, I guess, for you. So it's a very popular model in network analysis that could be applied to open or closed population. And there is three kinds of individual on this example. There are individual might be susceptible to be infected. There are infected people and there are recovered people. So the name of this algorithm is SIR, epidemic model. So you can sometimes you can have 4 states or just 2 states. So you are susceptible, infected, and you become susceptible again. That's it, SIS algorithm. So the algorithm I present here is SIR epidemic model. So epidemic. So in this case, we need to define the state. So the model is you can turn to infected coming from susceptible, and then you could become recover. So once you are recovered, you are not susceptible. So there are probability for each state to change the state. So to become infected from susceptible, the probability was lambda, and to become recovered from infected, the probability is beta. So we define the virus strength as S, which is the lambda divided by beta. So the most important thing of this is to design your network. So you describe your population, you just observe your population, and you describe them as this graph. So in this population, we have 5 persons in this example. So the links represent the spreading mechanism. So this could be, for example, they breathe the same air. That could be they have sexual activity, or they are drinking, or something like that. You could represent your graph like this. This one is This one is infected. This one is susceptible. This one is susceptible. This one is susceptible. This one is susceptible. So at the beginning we have this observation. So we apply the algorithm. It's a simulation algorithm. So this is the network at the time number 1, T1, and then that the network could change. So at T2, this one is became recovered, but he has infected his neighbor, and so on. So you can propagate the epidemic like that. So this is the state of T3. So you use the model of propagation of the epidemic, and then we construct our. So here it's a very small graph. So in reality, there we have a very huge graph, and we just stabilize the graph at the end. So what to apply this algorithm? What are the questions that we can answer with this algorithm. So the first one is how to describe dynamically the epidemic. The second one is when epidemic grow, when we can say that it's a pandemic. How to estimate the duration of an epidemic. So all of these questions are, there are many other questions that could be resolved by this kind of approach. So there are many variations of this algorithm that could be describe the modelization of the propagation of the epidemic. So this could be used for epidemic, but the name of the algorithm is epidemic, but you can use it for influence, all of influence propagation. On a network, on social network, you can say this person could influence this person with this function. So you can adapt this algorithm for many other situations outside the healthcare application. So the last part of my talk is the case study. The case study is a real case study. It was the basis of a PhD of our team. So in this case, we have, it's a very interesting case because it's a little bit different from that Anne presented previously. So I will talk about the general framework of this case study. Then I'll talk briefly about the theoretical background we used. So it's a little bit theoretic. The application we used to prove that this approach is working, how to model the experiment, and some result and discussion about this work. So the general framework is this one. Let's suppose that Alice wants to paint her house, and she's looking for a skillful painter. She published this information, and she received 3 offers. The first one is Eric, the second one is Fred, and the third is George. So there are 3 candidates. She already knows Eric because he painted their clinic some time ago, and she was satisfied by the job. So there is a relation between Alice and Eric. So we could call this relation, we could qualify this relation as like something like trust. So Alice trusts in Eric. Then we can add some other information. Sorry, I have to get my... So Alice decided to go further, and she asked their opinion to her friend Bob and Caroline. So Bob replies, Fred is a good professional. And Caroline responds that she had recently hired George, but she was not satisfied about his work. So this is the red link you find here. She also said that her sister Caroline said that her sister Diana confirmed that Fred is competent because she already asked him to paint her house and she was satisfied too. So we have Diana here, which is another actor. So, sorry. My slides are stopped. Sorry. I'll go back. Sorry for this problem. So she decided to cancel the George application, and she hesitated between Fred and Eric. Bob said that he was not satisfied about Eric. He said that Eric is an expert of some kind of walls, but not from wooden wall, for instance. So he is not sure that Eric is suitable for this job. So this conduct Alice to choose Fred at the end of the application. So, as you saw from this example, at the beginning Alice know Eric, so she hesitated to choose Eric, and at the end she chooses Fred. So she used collective trust to take a decision. So what is the moral of this story? That my computer doesn't work. Je sais pas ce qui se passe. Oh, ça devrait aller. Sorry. I think it's looking for the network. I have problem with network. So the moral of this story is that the shortest distance is not always the best one. Sometimes it's more efficient to use collective process to make a decision. So the main issue of this work is how to model collective opinion in a social network in order to use the model in the recommender system. So for that we use theoretical background, and the theoretical background is based on subjective logic. What is subjective logic? Subjective logic is in the family of probabilistic logic. So it's it's created by Josang, which is a Norwegian mathematician. And this logic takes account the trust, distrust, and ignorance between people of a social network. It integrates the creation and the evolution of trust, so it could be dynamic. And you have operation that could compute the aggregation and the propagation of the trust in a network. So it's a very interesting model. So it's a flexible formalism for modeling trust in a social network. So just a few words about subjective logic. So subjective logic is defined by a quadruplet, which is B, D, U, and A. B represents the belief, D the disbelief, U the uncertainty, and you have A, which is a basic rate, which is the prior information. So sometimes you have some information that just you know that 1% of population suffer of illness or disease, specific disease. So you can use this information. If you have not the information, you just decide that A is 0.5. So this is a neutral value of A that we use in our following example. So B, D, U, and A are comprised in the interval of 0 and 1. There is a contrast in subjective logic that B plus D plus U equal 1. So the addition of these three values is equal to 1. So there is W is the opinion, is defined as opinion, and we can compute the expectation of an opinion as this formula is B plus A times U. So you have this formula to quantify the opinion. So this is the basis of subjective logic. So, as I said, if you have any information about A, you could use the neutral value, which is 0.5. So, subjective logic have this kind of operation too. So, to compute the belief, you can use the positive and negative experience between users. So S was successful experiences, and S mean failed experiences. So you in this case we used the beta distribution of B and R, and W is just a non-affirmative constant to avoid the problem of R plus S equals 0, so we can divide by 0, so we just add a random W in the formula. So I know it's difficult to integrate all of this information in a few time, but we can represent all of this formula by a graphical example. So the graphical example is this one. We have a triangle, and the point, the trust is the opinion. So sorry, the opinion is designed by the blue point here. The blue point here. So at the beginning, we have, let's say that the first interaction we know anything. So we can assume that there is no successful, no failed interaction between users, and belief is, I don't know what's the value of belief, I don't know what's the value of this belief, but the uncertainty is maximal. So uncertainty is 1. So the belief uncertainty plus belief plus disbelief equal 1. So disbelief equals 0 and belief equals 0. So the point is here. So the length of the triangle is 1. So the first interaction, let's take the first interaction. So the second one, sorry, the first interaction is a successful interaction. So in this case, belief became 1, 3. Disbelief is 0, and uncertainty became 2, 3. So this is this point. And the second, the next interaction was a failed interaction. So we just compute. So the point slide from this point to this point. So each time you have an interaction, if it's a good interaction, it's a successful interaction, you go on the right, and if you have a bad failed interaction, you go to the right. And each time you have interaction, the uncertainty grow. So this model is very suitable for representing the trust. So this is the last. Sample. So it's successful. So we go to the right, but the value of uncertainty is growing. So there are some operations that are interesting. So we can define transitivity in this model, in this formalism. We can define the fusion on this model to represent the aggregation with some formulas. So there are many operations that you can define for this formalism. So we applied this formalism to one application, so one data set. So this data set is a Stack Overflow data set. What is a Stack Overflow? The Stack Overflow is a site, is a website when you can ask your question and the user can give answer to your question. So this is the first question. What are the function pointer and data pointers? And here we have two answers. So if you ask the question, you can decide that this is the best answer. So you just thumb this answer. But other people that could come to this website and I have the same problem, and he said, this one is better solution, is a better answer, or this one. So he could thumb up or thumb down the answer. So here the number 3 and number 4 are the cumulative rating of the users, of the other users. So you have question, you have answers, and you have votes that are given in the data set. And this is accepted response. So to model the trust, we use. So the question is how to rank this answer. So you have user A asks the question, user E, F, and G gives the answer. So how to rank this answer in this j'ai compris pourquoi ça marche pas. How to rank this question. So we use this so we model as trust like this. So you have the users, and the links are the opinion as we defined with the with our logic, so with our subjective logic. So we can compute the opinion on four interpretation. The first one is the rigorous one. So we can consider that accept is success and not accepting is a failure. So this is a choice. The second choice is ignoring. Unaccepted doesn't mean that it's not a failure. It's something that we don't know. So it's ignoring interpretation. The third one is independent. So rating are considered as success or failure for an interaction. And the last one is thumbing up or down. An answer is relative to other answers. If you choose one answer, that means that you don't choose the other answer. So we can combine these four interpretations of opinion to compute the opinion finally. So when we prefer the direct trusts, we can say that it's individual trust. So to combine the trust, we just use this formula to compute the score. If there is a direct link, just choose this directly. If there is not direct link, compute the opinion level. Collective trust means that to combine trust, you use the compute the opinion, even you have direct or not having direct relationship between two users. So you applied this technique to Stack Overflow data set. There are multiple domains. There are 30 domains. There are 153 users. There are 3,061 questions. There are 8,000 of answers, so it's a very big data set. So for each question, we have the accepted answer. For each answer, we have the total of thumb up and the total of thumb down. So we divide, as Anne said, the question in 5 subsets by domain, by learning, and 4 subsets for learning and 1 for the test. So you have 20% for evaluation and 80% for the training. So we do the cross validation. So we change each subset. One subset is for evaluation. Then for the second round, it's a second subset, and so on, to avoid some bias for the evaluation. We have 2 metrics. The first one is a mean reciprocal rank that measure the quality of the relation between 2 users. And we have MPLR, which is better. Which is a better indicator, which is the mean of predefined list rank. So this is this table shows some results that we could comment, we could discuss here. So when you use the 4 method for rigorous ignoring dependent and independent probabilistic, we have this score for MPLR. For individual trust, this is the first row, and for collective trust, it's the second row. So ignoring is a baseline, is considered as a baseline, and the better is collective trust. So if you say the MPLR greater is the MPLR, better it is. So the collective trust is globally better than individual trust. So the conclusion is that it's preferable to use collective trust, the expertise of the social network, than the direct relation to take a decision. So and we can see here that dependent probabilistic and independent probabilistic are the better one too, and the best one is rigorous with collective trust. So we can choose which are the best algorithm for this data. So for these studies, collective trust has considerably better performance than individual trust. An accepted answer can be profitable, and the overall conclusion is that subjective logic is flexible and is permit to extract trust information from answer, and it deal with incomplete image in this case. So this model can be used for many other domains where you have a social network and relationship that could be weighted between 2 people that could be considered as a trust relationship, and we can define a function to make this network dynamic. So with the experience between users, this network become change in time. So it's adapted. If there are successive interaction, all the opinions are recomputed. So this is a very nice formalism to represent trust. In recommender system presented by Anne, we can use this network for instance, to determine the distance between two users. So when you try to find which are the neighbors as Anne presented, instead of computing with collaborative filtering, in the formula of collaborative filtering, you have the distance between the user and all his neighbors. So you can use this network to do this. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, professor. O senhor tem que botar o fone, senão não vai me ouvir, não vai me entender. Muito obrigada pela atenção. Alguém tem alguma pergunta, alguma dúvida para o professor? Fique à vontade, meu querido. Chega aqui, venha. Fale aqui. Ah, é melhor? Tá. O senhor fica com esse aqui? Nós vamos usar o...
Faço a pergunta em português ou...
Pode fazer em português, se você preferir fazer em inglês, fique à vontade.
Em português, então. Para coletar dados de redes sociais, tipo Facebook, Stack Overflow, Twitter, eu acho que é um pouco mais simples do que uma rede social tipo WhatsApp, em que os dados são todos... não são dados abertos. Tem algum tipo de metodologia para coletar dados de uma rede social assim? Ou, por exemplo, de usuários com perfil trancado no Facebook ou no Twitter ou Instagram?
In my talk, I distinguish social media and social network. Social media is a particular case of social network. So in the case of, let's take the example of healthcare. So data are very sensible. So you can collect them easily. So, then we, in the project, it's very important to have a partnership with the provider of this data. So in our project, we work with Ministry of Education. So they give us. This morning, I told about the methodology, and in my talk, the previous talk, I put the stakeholder for collecting data. It's very important. So we have to put together to have partnership with all of these institutions, and at the very high level of this institution, it's a policy. It's a policy of the institution to give the data to the data scientists. It's not only a technological issue for the data. So we need the cooperation of all the stakeholders of where they own the data, and it's not sufficient. Sometimes we had some problem with IT services. So they say that we have not able to give this information, but we know that they exist. So there are you are right. There are sometimes many difficulty to have this information, this data. So we need a decision at the level of policy to have this data.
But I understand I can talk to like the health minister or something like that to get healthcare data. But when I talk about data from a company, like WhatsApp is my main concern here, because do you know WhatsApp?
I know. I have WhatsApp.
Okay, so it's a company owned by Facebook, and how can I talk to them to get data? Because here in Brazil we have elections in like 2 or 3 months, and fake news is a huge problem here.
Yeah.
How can we analyze social network data in a context like this?
I have no contact with WhatsApp, but if you participate to big conferences in the domain of recommendation, of user modeling, and so on, there are challenges that are integrated into these conferences, and sometimes big companies participate of these challenges. So they offer the data to competition. And sometimes you have like Netflix competition. You have data sometimes that are anonymized data, but you can study many things on this data. Sometimes these companies are their own research center, so they do not need of our intervention. But some of them cooperate with a university, and in this framework we can have access to their data. So, but it's very formal. It's not very simple to have this data, especially for WhatsApp. I don't know WhatsApp, but there are, I guess that it's very difficult because it's very sensible, because we are in personal information, so they are not allowed to. But in France, in the new RGPD, there is an exception for research. So researchers are privileged. So sometimes they can, some information could be given just for research job.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Boa tarde. Dentro desse contexto de informações adquiridas em comunidade de redes sociais, existe o cuidado com fake news?
Yes. I have not mentioned this dimension. So Anne has listed all the issues of the recommender system, or they are the same. So they must be robust. So there are some algorithms that are more robust than other one. So in this work I presented, we have not measured that, but we know that some of them are, in my results, one of the algorithms is more robust than the other, because it's the attack in this social network is done by a group of persons. So you have a small group that give fake information to influence the overall system. So there are many kinds that you can prevent with your algorithm. So you have to design robust algorithm, so more robuster algorithm, let's say, because there is a competition between the hackers and the data scientists. And there is another way to do that. It's to identify the attack. So the attack is done, and then you identify afterward the attack. So there are techniques of clustering. So Anne said that you can identify some group of people, and some group could be the attackers, the hackers of the system. So you can prevent, or you can guérir. How to guérir? Thank you for your question.
Yes, just what I say is we wish to determine that is that when a fake news arrives, that it is a fake news. But most of the time it's a little bit later. And we have the same problem on social media with spammers. And you have a lot of marketing campaigns and so on. So there are a lot of works now around how to detect that account is a account of a spammer, that a message is a spam, that account is a spammer, and then after that a campaign of spam. And there is specific algorithm to do that based on the clustering, Markov modeling, and such kind of things. Just for your question about how you can have information from, there are some of the producer, the network producer have an API, and then you can have some information. It's a case for Twitter, I think, but you have only a limited amount. You can do that, yeah, but you have only a restricted amount of data that you can have via this API in order to be sure that you do not collect too much information. And otherwise, you have collaboration. I mentioned to my...
Yeah. But there is API when it's open. Social media.
Yes,
but WhatsApp is not open social media, so there are sensible data, so that they are not allowed
yes, but just
in the use of term.
Just I want to say that there's collaboration.
Yeah.
And Cambridge Analytica, it's a famous scandal affair, but it's just a proof that you can have data from this network. I can.
Thank you.
Just take this one.
Yeah, is it working? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And can I collect? I understand I can use API to collect data from Twitter, from Instagram. I have no problem with that. But like I asked before, I have no idea how can I collect data from sensible networks like.
It's mandatory that they have, as we speak about sensitive data, they must protect this kind of data. For example, in Europe, it's not possible that social network does not protect sensitive data, as Azim said, because if no, they are not allowed to be used. So it's a balance, a compromise between protection of all the citizens and at the same time access to data. But for research, there are some exceptions, and then you can have some kinds of collaboration.
I believe that one of the solutions, or plan B if you want, is you get into all sort of groups. Once you cannot collect for, it's well known that WhatsApp will not allow it because I'll encrypt. So what we are saying is, can I decrypt? Can I use? No, you cannot. That's a fact. They will not give to you. But they allow you to go to the groups. They cannot stop you to go to like 20, 50 or a number of groups. And from there you extract your data. And from there you have, of course, it's far less than what you have, but at least you have a sense of where you are going. So I believe so. If you can do it, it's a one solution. That's one that pops in my mind.
Okay, so one thing that I think it's going to be a big problem in the future, it's already now with WhatsApp, is that most of the applications that lead with sensitive data, they are encrypting the data before it leaves your phone. So even if at least they tell us that. Actually, we can't get the data even if we ask them. So I think that using the bots is a good thing. Like in Telegram, for example, there's a lot of open source bots that you can use on the internet to go to the groups, like, I don't know, 1,000 groups, I don't know what's the limit, and get a data, and then you can do things like that. But if you have to do that manually, it's going to be a thing. Actually, I would like to know if I can do a question not specifically related to the presentation, but more about the research field in France. Is it possible?
Sorry.
A question about France and the research in there. So as professors in France and in Europe, I would like to know, how is you think that science is living a good moment right now there? It's been better a few years ago? You think it's going to be worse or better in the next years? You think it's a nice time to do science in Europe, for example?
It's a very
difficult question, right?
But yeah, it's difficult.
Is Macron doing a good job?
To be a researcher is always a good job, it's something pleasant. At the moment, it's difficult to give an overview of Europe's situation because each country has its own rules, its own way to run research and so on. I can only answer for France. It's a situation I know at the best at the moment. And yes, in the past, we were only researchers. Now we are also money collectors, and we have to find the way to support our research. So we need to have collaboration with companies and so on. It's a good time to study in France, yes. It's a good time to do research in France, yes, because you have a lot of opportunity. What is the most important, you have the freedom to do the research you want to do. You have to find the money to support your research, but you are nobody saying you have to research on that topic. You have the total freedom to say, I want to research on this topic because I think it's very important at the moment. It's your job to prove you are right. Nobody can say no, even President Macron. So if I say I want to do that, he say, okay, do it.
And you think France is going to have good opportunity for research in the next years?
What do you mean by new opportunities?
Yeah, doing a PhD in France.
Yeah. It depends on what you mean by stay in France. If you mean to have an academic career, it's very difficult, because we have not so many positions. But if you want to, we have also a lot of research and development jobs in companies. And then, yes, it's a very good opportunity at the moment because most of the company want to have now new research developments because they need it to be competitive. Yeah. So there is now is again money for that in companies. So we have a lot of collaboration with private companies that fund most of our research. We mentioned some companies, Stack Overflow, so on and so on. We have strong collaboration and they pay for the PhD, and after that, most of the time they say to the new doctor, please come to work with me now.
Yeah. And it's true. It's more true for data scientists. So
if you are a data scientist, you just have to say, I am a data scientist. Say, you will have a job. What is required is to speak French or at least English. You have to speak French or English. Okay. And we have all the materials to improve your French or your English, even if I am not a good example. We have a lot of open educational resources. And you're very welcome to come.
Professores, em nome do Dr. Ricardo Valentim, do professor Ricardo, eu quero muito agradecer em nome do professor Valentim, a presença de vocês, a participação, e agradecer também aos alunos, aos pesquisadores que vieram e puderam compartilhar com vocês essa oportunidade. Para nós foi muito, muito, muito importante.